Booth, life coach at brookeboothcoaching.com. And I'm going to talk about a question I get a ton around parenting and parenting issues. When is it age appropriate? Like, how can I know that? So, before we get there, my son, age 7, said something recently to me. He was listening to my husband and I have a conversation. We were trying to make a decision. I don't even remember what it is about. Not church. Probably like what color of paint or what color of tile to choose. And he said, Dad's right because he goes to church. And I was like, what? Excuse me? Right? Now, mind you, this kid went to an evangelical preschool on top of going to church with his dad, at the LDS church every way. He knows Jesus is important in kind of a rock star kind of way, and the Bible is most definitely his favorite book. But nonetheless, it's a real question. Kids ask questions like this, and how to address these types of questions. And question I hear, like I said at the beginning, almost invariably is, what is age appropriate? When is it age appropriate to really talk to my kid about faith transition? And other questions are, when is it age appropriate, to talk about mixed faith marriages and all the things that we're doing? How can a parent be true to themselves and their beliefs without undermining their spouse? And so these are really hard questions people grapple with in a mixed faith marriage. So I'm going to give you a few ideas. First, I want to talk a little bit about age appropriate. Like I said, I hear it a lot. And I think it's really important to ask, what does that even mean? Because it's really, I think a lot of people use it to put off doing something that they know is a bit uncomfortable and they don't really want to do. So they'll just say, well, we'll worry about that when it's age appropriate. So I suggest this to my clients, and I'll suggest it to you, that you get really clear on what you mean by age appropriate. What do you mean when you say that? Are you using it as an excuse to avoid putting off something today that you don't want to do because it's uncomfortable or you're not sure the best way of handling it? Because if we're using it to avoid making a decision or having a hard conversation, then we're not actually using it as a tool, we're using it as an excuse. So I see this happening. This is a real indicator of if you're using it as a reason to avoid having hard conversations with your kids or even with your spouse about your kids, is I see it a lot. I see people saying, well, when they're teenagers, we'll talk about this. And then when they become teenagers, they say, well, my kid isn't as mature as other kids, so they're not ready yet. It's not appropriate yet. So really start asking yourself, I hear they're a young 12-year-old, or they're not emotionally mature, 13-year-old, things like this. So what does it even mean to you to be age appropriate? Is that something you really want to keep saying, or are you just saying it as an excuse? It's okay to keep saying it. It's okay to decide that they're not ready yet and that that's not age appropriate. Just be on with yourself if it's an excuse not to have a conversation that you really want to be having. Okay, another, and this is probably the most important tip I can give to parents when it comes to talking about kids about faith transition, is honesty. This is my cardinal rule when it comes to parenting in a mixed faith marriage. I'm always honest with my kids. If they asked a question, I'm going to be honest, even if it's uncomfortable. Even if my answer is uncomfortable, even if they might not understand it fully, even if they might understand it differently when they're older, even if I know it'll make my spouse uncomfortable. Now, hear me on this. That doesn't mean I'm rude. It doesn't mean I'm undermining. It doesn't mean I'm trampling on my spouse's beliefs. But I also don't downplay my own. I see so many of my clients in mixed faith marriages compromise their own integrity and their own beliefs out of concern for hurting their spouse and out of concern about being perceived as hostile. And then that undermines their own parenting, and then they get so resentful and so frustrated that they have to compromise their parenting, and it just turns into a huge mess. Hear me on this. There can be space for both. There can be space for my beliefs, there can be space for my husband's beliefs. And I'm honest about both. I might say, like, I believe this and your dad does not, or your dad believes this and I do not. Like, I'm honest about both. I hold space for both. I let both be part of the conversation, and not in a disparaging, like, can you believe he believes this kind of way, but in, like, they ask a question and I say, this is my answer and this is your dad's answer. Or maybe if I don't feel like I'm equipped to answer on behalf of him, I'll say, this is my answer. Let's go ask dad what his answer is, so you can hear all the perspectives. Because there's many answers to this question, and there's many ways other people interpret this and give answers to this question. It's such a powerful way of parenting from a really honest place. And what this does is, when you're just meticulously honest, it helps prevent resentment and feelings like I can't teach my kids things that are important to me. And again, it doesn't mean that I'm right. You tell them I'm right and they're wrong. It means you tell them the truth about what you believe and the truth about what your spouse believes. It's a very different thing. And this approach I really like because it helps kids see very much firsthand that there's room for mom, that there's room for dad. And do you know what that means? It means there's also room for them in this family. It helps them see that even if they're a little bit different, or if they see things different, or if they decide things differently, they will also be loved and accepted in this family. It is a very, very powerful gift to offer your kids. So when I do this with so let's go back to my son when he mentioned this at the beginning, when he said, we should follow dad's thing here because he's right, because he goes to church. So I'm going to tell you what I did and how I handled that. I did nothing in the moment. And I'll tell you why. I knew my example was more important than what I do on Sunday, than that action, that choice. I know that he said that because of where he was developmentally, but in time, that won't make sense to him anymore. He'll grow out of that. I know that I'll have plenty more conversations with him about my choices and my beliefs, and I don't have to counter every argument, everything that's said, and every time a comment is raised. I can choose my responses for more appropriate times and for situations that I think are more beneficial. And I know that others will always teach him things that I don't necessarily agree with. And I also know I can teach him things that I do agree with. And this one's the most important of all. I also know that he's only 7, but even at 7, he gets to choose what he believes. And if that's what he believes now, then I can hold space for that and allow that. It doesn't mean I don't offer additional insights or additional ways of looking at it. But that's why I chose to do nothing in that moment when he offered that, because I knew and I had full confidence that there would be plenty of other conversations in the future where we could talk about this and talk about it in developmentally appropriate ways. Okay. Hope you find that helpful. If you have to ask you the darndest questions about your faith transition, welcome to the group, right? That is just what kids do. Again, my tips are: watch yourself on the age appropriate in your head. Like, are you using that as an excuse, or is that really truly how you want to respond? And then just be honest. Honesty is always what's going to help you the best in any parenting situation. Okay, if you need help with your kids and parenting in your mixed faith marriage, I would suggest reaching out to me. Message me on Facebook, go to my website, brookeboothcoaching.com, and get one of my free calls. I offer just a few every month. You can get on one of those calls and we can talk about your marriage. We can talk about parenting and how it's working in a mixed faith marriage. You can see if coaching is a good solution for you. All right, wishing you the best.